Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Robert Winters,
Judy Nathans.
and today is November 20th,
That's right.
2018.
Right.
All right.
Thanksgiving week.
Actually, I often reminisce about two things around this time of year. One is Thanksgiving memories. I don't know if you have any favorite Thanksgiving memories.
Thanksgiving has not been good for me in the last 8 years.
Not
It's
great?
too many people dying around
Yeah,
Thanksgiving, so
yeah.
it's colored it. But
Yeah.
anyway.
I think there are two things I associate with, mainly with Thanksgiving. One was one time when a friend of mine actually said, "Hey, you want to go out for pizza?" And then he drove upstate New York
Oh, for pizza?
for pizza.
Oh my
I
God.
said, "Okay, fine, I'll go. I'll go anywhere, right?"
Yeah.
And then the pizza place was closed.
Oh.
So we turned around, and then he booked it on the New York State Thruway at up to 120 miles per
Oh
hour.
my gosh.
Fastest I've ever gone.
Jeez. Not in your VW, obviously.
And
No.
we got pulled over and we got arrested.
Oh.
And and
Arrested, not just ticketed.
apparently they'll just ticket you if you're up to 99.
Oh my God. He
right.
went 120 and you didn't bat an eyelash?
You know,
at that?
it was kind of interesting watching those little dashed lines on the road going by like
What kind
like
of
that.
car was it?
a Cadillac.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, he was a real boat.
So you were arrested. You had to go to the.
Actually,
headquarters?
what happened was they actually took us to the judge at like 2 in the morning at his home, woke him up out of bed.
no.
The judge was wearing like his night clothes.
Oh my
And we're at
God.
his bar in his basement, and that became the court.
Oh, this sounds like
and-
Alice's restaurant story. You know,
Right.
like,
And they were gonna arrest Joe
yeah.
and hold him, and then let me go so I could drive home. But I had no driver's license, so
Oh
they
my
couldn't arrest
God.
me because I had committed no crime.
Drive home in his car?
Yeah, but I had never driven a car in my life,
Oh
so
my
they couldn't do
God,
that.
how
So
old
they
were
had
you?
to release us. So they drove us back to the car.
Oh my God.
I don't know, it was about 18, 19.
Oh, you were
something like
really
that.
young
Oh yeah, and
stupid to go to do that.
That was pretty stupid, sure. Yeah.
I didn't realize you were that young.
Yeah. And then we got, and then the cops left, and
Did he have a
and
ticket?
then Joe reached in his
Yeah.
pocket to find the keys, and he'd lost the keys.
Oh my God.
And it was getting freezing cold, and we were not dressed for the occasion. And we hitchhiked to a hot shop along the New York State Thruway. And, and then later on, the same cops who arrested us actually came by and said, "What the hell are you people doing here?"
So,
Yep.
were the keys left at the police
Well, we
station?
found out in
Or-
the morning. I think in the morning the cops actually dropped us off back there and then when daylight came, they actually found the key. We found the
Oh my
keys.
This is a story you have to tell at a story slam. It's really
Yeah.
quite funny.
It was fun.
Now, was that on Thanksgiving?
And I got back home in time. My mother was actually cooking
Oh.
Thanksgiving dinner, and I said hi.
Wait, so it was the day before?
Yeah, it was Thanksgiving
Oh my
Eve. Yeah.
gosh.
And of
That
course,
is a great story.
and the other,
Yeah.
of course, the other one is Alice's Restaurant in Massacree, with Four Parts Harmony and.
Well, that's what it
27,
reminds
8 by
me.
10.
It was like everything can go wrong, goes
Yeah,
wrong, and
yeah,
the police and
yeah.
all that.
And
That's
I,
a good one. Yeah.
Maybe the tradition will die out, but the thing is, I actually always look forward to snapping a radio on Thanksgiving Day at various times during the
Interesting.
day with the hope that they'll
Yeah.
be playing Alice's Restaurant.
Well, some of us,
on the
you
radio.
can get that on an iPhone or something. If
Yeah.
you had
Well,
one.
this is for those of
but-
you who know what radio is.
Oh,
Yeah.
stop.
Right.
I have a radio and
Yeah.
I have a.
Yeah. By the way, have you
Alexa.
ever seen the film Alice's Restaurant?
Oh, years ago. I haven't.
It's actually a pretty
yeah.
good film.
Is
I
he
think.
in it actually?
Yes,
All
he
of that-
is. Yeah. It's a very interesting commentary about sort of the.
It's not Jonathan Demme, is it? I think I
No.
did that.
It was pretty much an amateurish cast.
Yeah.
But I think they were some of the real people in it.
Yes. Yes.
And it was, it was actually pretty good commentary on what was a mindset about going the way and living in communes at the time, and all the things that can actually go wrong with
Right.
drug addiction
Right,
and whatever.
right.
And it's really quite something. And
Yeah.
but I had the indelible image of the scenes from the church, Alice's
Yeah,
Restaurant
right.
in my mind. And then one time I went to Great Barrington. We actually went to
Yeah.
the place where the church was.
Right.
And we actually went bang, 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 knocked on the door for a while.
Yeah.
And Arlo Guthrie's daughter actually
She's
came out and met us.
right. Yeah. There's a whole.
We had,
yeah.
we
it
had
continued
coffee
it.
with her.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
nice.
it was pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, the joke was, I don't know if I ever mentioned this before, but because I drive a VW bus. And
Yeah.
when I go back out, and I
right.
caught my bus is parked next to the railroad tracks. and somebody comes by and looks at the bus, looks at me and goes, "Is that the bus?"
Oh
I
gosh.
said, "Not even close."
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny.
So anyway, those are my Thanksgiving memories.
Yeah, I'll have to remember that. I'll have to look that movie up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh yeah. So I don't go away for Thanksgiving anymore. We just
No,
sort of
yeah,
hang out.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
Turkey or no, I don't know. We'll just be around.
Yeah.
So we did have a city council meeting last night.
It was long, I got home from doing my thing that I had to do, and it was still on. It was 9:55. So I watched it this morning, but I kind of turned it off at about 9:30. I didn't want to hear the radio.
Yeah, I got there late because I had to be,
Yeah.
just like we talked a little bit last week
About
about
voting,
voting and elections and whatever. It just seems like once the midterm elections passed, immediately all these other topics suddenly got big again, like election methods and
ranked
what's happening,
choice,
ranked
and
choice
who
voting.
do people go to? The
Yeah, I get a
expert
lot of
here.
calls.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was at a forum up at Harvard, which maybe we talk about a little bit later, but it was then made it to the city council meeting a bit later. With
But that was probably where most of the
visions of elections methods danced in my head.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Although
and,
that was not mentioned. That
No,
was
no.
not on the agenda last night at the
Definitely
city
not,
council.
definitely
But some hot stuff was the First Street garage situation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So this is something I think we've addressed a little bit. Actually, when Patrick was on here a couple of weeks, we talked a little bit about it
Yes.
too. So, but I think commencing in 2014.
Something like, because I heard
Right.
15, but I think 14.
Yeah,
was,
but there was a big controversy about the Edward J. Sullivan Courthouse, or the Middlesex County Courthouse,
which is that tall building.
the tall building,
Right,
which has
yeah.
been derelict, empty,
For how long?
probably close to a decade now.
That's crazy.
Could be more actually.
Wow.
And it's sort of ridiculous. So
Yeah.
the state went through a process of disposition, the Division of Capital Assets Management, DCAM, and I think the people bid on the right to develop it with the condition that they would also address and do remediation of the asbestos problem
Right, 'cause
in the
that's an
buildings,
issue,
which is
right.
extraordinarily expensive. So it was Leggett McCall was the company that got the rights.
When?
It was actually around then, and then
A decade ago.
no, about four.
But you said the city owned it. I don't get it.
No, the city doesn't own the courthouse.
Okay.
What the city
No,
owns
that's
is
flashes.
the garage, First Street
Okay.
garage, and then with what happened with the courthouse is that then there was a series of there was, I think that it went before the planning board and they were going
Uh-huh.
to decide on what to do with the disposition of it, and there had to
Okay.
be some accommodation for that. And anyway, but then litigation commenced and continued for quite a while, and it's, I guess, except for the dotting of the i's, I guess all the litigation is done. So now the question comes of, okay, so what's going to happen? And so Leggett McCall's now gearing up again for actually doing the redevelopment of the building, but the redevelopment of the building was in part built upon this presumption that they would be able to utilize some of the parking spaces
for the public.
for a long-term lease in the First Street garage.
Who would be allowed? Leggett McCall or
Yes,
the
Leggett
city?
McCall.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
I mean, because the city controls that garage.
Right.
And it was a little bit controversial back 3 or 4 years ago when this issue came up. Probably, it was more like 4 years ago, or something like that. I think it's about 4. And they actually even at the time said that, well, if that can't work out, then they went and approached the people from the Galleria Mall about possibly using some of those spaces. But I'm told by people that know
It's not even that close.
that deal is a little off the table now. But
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's for sure.
Hmm.
And also, what's happened in the subsequent years is that the people of the owners of the Galleria Mall are actually considering doing some significant revision to the whole concept of the Galleria Mall. So you might actually see a little bit of housing built into it.
Right.
Maybe, I hope.
Well, because Sears is leaving, right?
Sears is
Yeah.
leaving, so if one of the big anchor stores goes, that's the time you might want to actually do something interesting. Personally, I'd just love to see them re-envision, is that word again,
Yeah.
the whole First Street facade, which to me is like an annoying blank wall.
Yep.
And turn it into
Yep.
something a little more reasonable.
Yeah.
But part of the proposal involves actually eliminating some of the parking that is associated with the Galleria Mall. So
Which is a problem for the neighborhood because,
yeah, I mean the thing is that in certain circumstances, having that whether it's surplus or not is part of the issue, I guess. But having the surplus parking for people to park in the winter when they have to do street cleaning, for plowing. Has been a great luxury, and those spaces like that are disappearing.
so why can't the developer in the bid or something just say, we'll allow 200 spaces for the neighborhood? I don't get that. I mean, what's the big, then it could be, go ahead.
Well, first off, the Sullivan Courthouse itself has some parking, but with the
I keep hearing the number 400 and then 800. I don't know what the difference is.
but not the courthdhouse. I don't know how many
okay.
spaces
All
they
right.
actually have. But
Well,
the
maybe it
thing
was
is-
400 in the courthouse.
Yes.
garage.
So
Yeah.
with the redeveloped building, there would be new businesses and offices and whatever going on there, plus some housing. I think it was it was like 24 units of housing, or maybe
Well, that's the
more.
model, retail
Right.
housing /
So you put some housing in there. They lop off a few floors off the building as a bit of a concession to the neighborhood. But it's still they don't have sufficient parking to support
Right.
the plan. So that's why they went to seek a leasehold agreement with the city garage, and remember that garage was built at least in part to support the courthouse, which
Right,
doesn't
which
exist
which
anymore.
which actually probably attracted a lot of people between lawyers and defendants and
Yes.
everybody else. So would it
Jurors,
actually
yeah.
attract the same amount of people?
Well, I don't know, and the other things have happened too. There's been some new development in the area, so
Yeah,
maybe
well,
that's
that's
putting
true.
a little bit more of
I
a
mean,
load on the
Carlone brought up
garage.
the whole thing about North Point and how that's
Yeah, but
changing.
but I have to say that
What?
that's something I find perplexing because maybe if you were like right at the edge of North Point, but the truth is that if you're going to be
Pretty
working
close
in
to
North
there,
Point,
no?
well, yes and no. It's not too far, but the thing is, usually you like your accessory parking to be within a certain number of hundred of feet of.
Well, the
where you're using
Galleria
it.
parking isn't that close to that either. You think about it.
Well, the Galleria parking is really close to the Galleria.
Right,
so
but
that's
it's
the
not
parking
necessarily
for it.
right. But I'm
I-
just saying if they were going to use those sites
I could
as
have
to
this
replace.
wrong, but they call
courthouse.
it accessory parking, where you have parking that's not within the premises, but it's used for a
Right.
particular building.
Okay.
So the Galleria space is really a couple blocks away.
Right.
The First Street garage is like a block away, within a block. So it's accessory parking, but it's pretty close. The further away you go, I mean, somebody was talking about, well, the pressure from Kendall Square, and I said, if you're working in
No,
Kendall, you're
Kendall
not
is
parking
not even
at the
really.
First Street garage.
That's a whole different area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they're running shuttle buses or something, which I
Right,
guess
which
is
is
conceivable.
possible. Yeah.
But anyway,
Using a scooter,
so
the last mile.
largely because I'd heard the proposal to do this leasehold agreement on the First Street garage spaces, I just sort of got it in my mind. Well, of course, you got to have to do something like that eventually. So then it was the only thing that was left was some of the details. But then actually somebody was former city councilor Anthony Galluccio actually said something, and I went, oh, wait a minute.
Said something in private to you.
No, he actually
Oh.
said it publicly,
Oh.
and it was like a Facebook publicly.
Oh, okay.
But he pointed out, he said, the right way to do this and the way it's done in other cities is what you do. And this is counterintuitive at first. He says you should just waive the parking requirements for Leggett McCall completely. And just say you don't have to provide any parking at all
Wow.
for anybody who lives well, maybe the people who live in the building, but for anybody who works in the building. Now, what does that mean? Because, I mean, that's counterintuitive to me.
It means that people park in the streets.
Except that all the parking on the street is resident only.
Yeah, so
So therefore, that's not available to them unless
there's no metered parking there? Might be some.
so
yeah.
eliminate the metered parking. Or provide a very limited supply
I don't
of
think a
metered parking.
developer would want that.
No, but the thing is that what then happens is that if the developer develops to whatever scale they want to develop, to sort of make things economical for them, and then people have to commute to work there, the presumption would be you'd want to maximize the number of local people who get there through alternate transportation, but that's not going to be everybody.
Yeah.
So then people who wanted to drive to work in the Sullivan Courthouse building would be on their own. They just have to find parking, and guess where they would probably find the parking? In the First Street garage. In other words, even if you waive the parking requirement, the Leggett McCall having to
Yeah.
make a leasehold arrangement, the fact that there is that parking garage, and if there really is surplus parking, then people will simply drive there and they will rent.
So that
get a
exists,
pass.
and how many spaces does the First Street garage have?
I forget, it's in the
So,
hundreds.
and
Yeah.
it's used,
It supports
Since-
some things.
well,
around
since the
area.
courthouse is gone, how occupied it? Well, I guess that's the part of this
Right.
policy order, was to do some kind of study or something?
Originally, there was,
Parking study?
a few years ago, it was said flat out, the city study said that there was surplus parking, so that wouldn't be a problem for it to actually
But that was
provide a
years ago.
long-term lease. Right, so some people are now saying in the 3 or 4 years since then that somehow everything's
Things
changed.
have gotten built up, yeah.
And to some degree, I think that's true.
And
hence the
they need to
for
do a
parking
new study, yeah.
Yeah, so there'll be a new study, and honestly, most of that I think is not gonna be that hard to do.
Yeah,
But it's funny how it just escaped my thoughts completely, that one possibility is just waive the parking and basically tell the Leggett McCall folks to have their employees you're on your own, folks.
yeah, but
And then-
I could see where there'd be argument that they wouldn't necessarily want to tell their employees, because they may not get the
Well,
employees they want then.
Well, they wouldn't have
know?
reserved parking, so people would have to sort of find parking, and if they found
That's
that
what
it
I'm
was.
saying, but they may want to get some reserved parking.
If they
in
found
the
that
deal.
there was too competitive or too
Yeah.
expensive, then people would have an incentive, a natural incentive to seek other forms of transportation. And so the
Well,
city's policies about transportation demand management would actually maybe
Yeah.
dovetail in rather well with this.
It all sounds good on paper, but I don't think it would work. But
Well,
that's me.
I just,
I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, it's just that I think
I-
that there's too many steps along the way. and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can see where a developer would not want to take that kind of risk where it's.
maybe not, but the thing
yeah.
is that if they have the rights to do the development, they
Yeah.
could either walk away, which I doubt
Well,
they would do, or they would
yeah.
find a way to make it work as best
Yeah,
they can.
it seems to me there'll be some meeting of the ground here and there,
Yeah,
negotiation, yeah.
So I think something
Yeah.
will get worked out. We'll see.
But certainly, so how did that end up? I forget whether that was a policy, well, I guess they all agreed to have the parking
Yeah, I
study.
mean, it was just a subject
Yeah.
of the charter right. It was really just formal and just kick the can down the road a couple of weeks so that they could discuss it.
Oh,
They
because
did.
it had been a charter right
Right. So
about
now
it,
the
right.
city. I'm sure they got the message. So
Right.
they were already starting the study.
They're gonna hire
Right.
another consultant in December to do the parking study. More consultants, yeah, okay.
A lot of consultants. We
Lot of
love to do
consultants.
consultants here.
Jeez.
Well, part of the reason I think, and this is the cynic in me, is
Yeah.
that sometimes a city, if you're a department head or a city official, you want to be able to say, well, the consultant said this, as opposed to, I have come to this conclusion based on our staff and our research,
Mm-hmm.
because then the city council comes back and says, well, I don't believe you, and I'm going
Oh.
to question your judgment or whatever.
Oh.
And it's kind of deflects a little bit if you can actually say,
I
well,
know,
we brought in
then-
this professionals.
But then
here
they
to
could
do it."
say, we don't like what they said.
They can,
So,
well,
yeah.
and they've been known to do that.
I
in
know,
recent
well, the
times
whole
as well.
vision,
Yes, yeah, well, that's a whole nother.
that's
can
a
of
whole other
fish.
can of worms.
By the way,
yeah.
I got the notification, I think it was yesterday, the day before, that our Envision Cambridge Advisory Committee
Yeah,
is
that's scheduled, right?
we're gonna actually have one last meeting,
Ooh,
on, I think, December 5th.
oh,
Right. I mean, I think at this point, they must be already putting the report together. I'm still sort of astonished at what little a role we got to play in any of this, which is, I think, part of the problem. Not that
Yeah.
I think we ever should have been authoring anything, but
right,
the fact that the working groups sort of generated wish lists. The advisory committee, pretty much all we ever really got to do was to review the presentations to see whether this was going to be a good presentation or not, which really disappointed me. Some of the suggestions I had made early on, like actually it was a subject of a city council order at last night's meeting, a non-controversial one, was about there wanting to be an intercity conversation about housing, the affordable housing crisis, as it said in the order. And one of the things that I really
oh,
stressed,
regional,
regional,
right,
in
yeah.
other words, not just city
Simmons,
unilaterally
I
trying to
think.
solve
Simmons,
all
yeah.
the housing problems.
Mhm.
And I said we have to do this regionally, or else it's completely worthless. And you know, I was pretty insistent on it, and it never happened at all.
Yeah.
And it was one of the greatest disappointments about the whole process for me is that they never got regional. It was all
Yeah.
unilateral. Cambridge is going to do it all, and I just think that's ludicrous, especially when it comes to housing. So anyway, you know, maybe something will come. Of
It's not
this
even in a
council.
recommendation though that Envision has, that they need to work with other.
I'd have to
cities?
look real careful. I think
I would
maybe
think that
people
was-
just understand that, but it
Yeah.
certainly wasn't part of the process. So. Another big thing that happened last night was something I'm not going to claim any great understanding, was that there were a couple of items on unfinished business having to do with the surveillance ordinance,
Right.
proposed surveillance ordinance, which has been batted around now for I think a couple of years, and a street performer, an update to the street performer ordinance, which has been around for 20
Well,
plus
that
years.
surveillance, I thought was a policy order, it wasn't a
Well,
unfinished, was it? Was it both?
Originally, it was a policy order, I think,
Oh,
from
okay.
Denise Simmons.
Because I see number.
But now, then it was unfinished business, and then it was, the manager came back with the report from the law department,
Right,
where they had
okay.
hammered out some language that seemed to address most of the city councilors' concerns.
Right,
Though
right.
not all.
Right.
So, you know, they had a lot of argument about it. I think Councilor Kelly felt
Well,
like it
he
was being
said-
rushed along.
Right, he said this was not that he had been sitting there for 3 hours, he said, why, I don't think it needs to get passed tonight. I guess he
Well,
voted,
I think,
yeah.
I mean, his point was simply that.
Or passed
you
to
know,
the ordinance
We've
committee
already
for
been,
a second
we've already
reading.
been working
Yeah.
on this for a year or
Mm.
more. What's the insistence on having it be done by the end of December?
Mm.
And I kind of agreed. I said, yeah, doesn't seem to be any objective reason why
Mm.
it has to be done by the end of December. You know, is it because, you know, is the police department considering doing something
So
really
it's
fishy
not
in
like it's a
January?
petition that has to
No.
be expired, there's nothing to do
No,
with that,
no,
right.
no. Municipal ordinances are not like zoning amendments.
right.
So they don't
So,
expire.
was there an answer to that?
Well, so in the end, so the mayor was very insistent on, we gotta get this through now, so.
Well, all it means, it goes to second reading, it's not a
Right,
done deal,
yeah, and then he
right?
said then it would be amended. It was interesting, you know, the ordinance proposed on itself is voluminous.
Yeah, it's like
And-
19 pages or something.
And the law requires that when you do an ordinance change, you have to publish it in the paper of general circulation, which just basically means Cambridge Chronicle.
Mm.
So the city clerk said, well, you know, so what's the time frame for this? Says, well,
19
it
pages in the
depends.
Chronicle?
It depends on whether they can fit it in. You know, if they can fit it in this week, then we can act on it. You know, by a certain date.
They're not gonna do that, are they? They're gonna put 19 page, the paper isn't even 19 pages, is it?
But they can always add a page. You know,
That'd be unusual.
it would be unusual. But the thing is
They'll
that
put it in 2-point font or something.
you know, really, it's just a formality.
Get your readers
anyway.
out. Get your,
Yeah. You know, I question the whole sense in this day and age, internet day and
right,
age,
just have a link.
of having newspaper
Right.
legal notices that way anyway.
It doesn't make sense, because
Doesn't
you can
really
have
make
you can go to
sense.
the library, read it.
Yeah, right. So,
It's
but
not-
the law says it has to be advertised, and that's why if you pass it to a second reading, at that point, the clerk sends it to the papers for advertising.
Boy,
A certain amount of days have
that's
to
gonna
click off.
change. I can see that change happening.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a state, federal.
It is a state
city?
law. Yeah.
That's
And then
yeah.
they can ordain it after it has gone through the appropriate waiting period. You know, we'll see where it goes. So they did pass it to a second reading. Councilor Kelly voted no, not
Weren't
because
there 2 no's?
Councilor Toomey, I believe, also
Yeah.
voted no.
I thought there were 2 no's.
And it was, I think, largely because it was more of a
The process?
yeah, they were saying
Yeah.
like, why are you rushing this along? You know, so they voted no for that purpose.
Mm.
So the city will pass it. You know, I think the really interesting part about it, you know, I don't much care about all the stuff that the American Civil Liberties Unions was insisting have to be in there.
Kate
I'm sure it's
Kelly.
all wonderful, but you know, to me, there was a real city charter issue about to what degree can the city council pass an ordinance that dictates how the police chief or the Cambridge Police Department, which works for the city manager, has to actually carry out their job. You can pass policies, but if you're actually in a what they were calling an, I forget what the term is, it's exigent circumstances. So like if there's an emergency and the police have to do some kind of a surveillance, you don't want to have to say, well, I'm sorry, we really can't do this because the city council we didn't go
Yeah.
to the city council and get the okay.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a circumstance where it's warranted, like for example with the marathon bombings or whatever, where you had to really
But
sort of
I-
step it up.
But I thought that was part of all this, that
Right,
they're
well,
allowed to do
not
that.
originally, so the
Oh, I
thing
see.
is that so in the various revisions, they made sure that they got language in there that did not
That protects it,
unfairly
right.
tie the hands of the police department.
Right.
So that even if they have to do that, then there's like a 90 days in which you have to report to the
Mhm.
council what you actually did and why and whatever.
Right, right,
So
right.
that seems like a pretty good compromise.
Yeah,
And I think we're the first one on the East Coast doing this, so it'll
Really?
probably be, yeah, I mean, there's some places out in on the West Coast where
Hmm.
they've done something like this, so. Anyway, so it's passed to the second reading, along with the street performer revisions,
buskers.
the buskers, which has an interesting history itself.
Mm.
I mean, my recollection back in the 90s, because I think I was actually asked to help do some editing or something back then from mutual friends. Stephen Baird was with I forget what the name of the entity is, but they were basically drafting the street performer ordinance basically to kind of create a level playing field for performers in Harvard Square primarily, so they weren't basically beating each other up, like this is my spot.
Because you didn't need a permit or anything then.
Right,
Is that
and there was a problem of some performers playing at high volume, drowning out others.
Yeah.
So they wanted to have a situation where they hired sound monitors to regulate the volume so that you didn't do that.
Mm.
So they actually enacted fees, modest fees, but it was basically to cover the cost
Was
of the
that the
street,
$40
monitors.
fee? Yeah.
Yeah. So now they're doing some, on the floor of the council last night before they passed to the second reading, they were removing all the fees, and I thought to
Because
myself,
it went down to 15.
it was already, they dropped it
To 15.
considerably.
And this was Jason Weeks presenting.
Yeah,
And he,
and then some city councilors, maybe because they're kind of appealing to some of the low rent artists or something, but they just says, let's just eliminate all fees, make it a free for all.
they were okay for the permit, which makes sense, because I guess you don't even need a permit in Boston. They were
Right.
quoting Boston,
Yeah,
Somerville, you
yeah.
don't need
So
a
we're a
permit,
little
but the
bit different.
permit, people feel gives the protection, and that the artists themselves wanted this. I mean,
Yeah, so
I
there's a
heard
sense
two
of what
different
they're buying.
versions here. I heard Jason Weeks' version of artists saying that they
Yeah.
don't mind the fee, and then I heard the
Alright.
counselor's version.
So
I don't
maybe
know.
we'll pick up a little bit more on this in
Yeah.
a few minutes, because it's actually kind of interesting. So
Yes.
see you in
Okay.
a couple of minutes on Inside Out.
All right.